Converted Man here, and today I'm going to be looking at a video by Sarah Moore called Sharing My View of Noah's Ark with an Atheist.
Warwick Ricky fan on Twitter asked me yesterday how Noah got two of every animal into the ark, and he tagged this question with, "Where's the logic?" He's an atheist and I'm a Christian, so, a big difference in thought there.
Well, yes, there is a big difference there, at least of views of how the world and universe functions. You believe that there is a God, and an atheist would not believe that. However, logic does not change, no matter what our view on God is. If there is a God, logic still would function the way that it functions, and if there is not a God, logic would still function the way it functions. The concept and ideas of logic are irrelevant to whether there is or is not a God. So the question that this person is asking you is, what is the logic of this situation? And they're asking for a response about this particular event in the Bible. They want you to produce a logical argumentation for this idea.
Matthew chapter 19 verse 26 says, "With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible."
This is known as circular logic or circular argumentation, depending on what you're doing here. You're reading from the Bible and you're using that reading to explain what your viewpoint is on the Bible. The Bible allows me to view it in this way. Okay, why should we think that the Bible is anything more than a book of mythology? If I start quoting you verses from the Quran, or talk about what Buddha said, or tell you about Shiva the Destroyer from the Hindu religion, none of those things are going to hold any weight to you. Not just because you don't believe that those things are real or true, but because I have yet to demonstrate that any of those things have validity in and of themselves. I have not given you any reason to think that those books and those writings and those teachings are anything more than mythology. Similarly, you have not demonstrated that your holy book is anything more than one more book of mythology. You might believe that it is not, but that belief is irrelevant to the case that one would have to make to demonstrate that we can trust that this particular book is not just a book of mythology. So citing itself to then describe how you know it's true from itself is circular. I know that the Hindu books are real because the Hindu books say that they're real. It's not a way to establish how anyone besides myself could think that the Hindu books are real. And we call this circular argumentation, circular logic, and it's a logical fallacy, and it's something that makes us skeptical of the conclusions that that person holds.
So my answer is pretty simple. God told Noah precisely how to build the ark, gather the animals, and take care of them.
This is what I would call the miracle clause. The miracle clause is a clause, like in a contract clause, that allows you a get-out-of-jail-free card. How did this work? A wizard did it. Now, that statement, "a wizard did it," is an explanation for any loophole that I want. In movies, often you'll see an event that happens in the movie that's called Deus Ex Machina. God did it. God willed it into being. How did they know what, when, and where this was going to happen? We never saw them get that information. It's a plot hole, but whatever. God did it. Okay, fine. We have a miracle clause. It is not, however, a logical explanation. Miracles, by definition, are not logical. They break the rules of nature and break the rules of how we think things work. Miracles are essentially, for lack of a better terminology, magic. How do I tell the difference between an angel creating something and making something happen, and a demon creating something and making something happen? There is no way to tell the difference, at least from my viewpoint. Both are miraculous in nature, both break the laws of physics, and both are events I cannot explain without these mysterious powers that these entities have. Neither one is something that I can apply logic to, because a miracle is something that is not logical. It is something that cannot be tested, cannot be understood. The moment that one could understand a miracle, it would be a natural phenomenon, and we couldn't call it a miracle anymore. So, if we are to say, well, God is the only one that can perform miracles, and for sake of this particular conversation, I'm going to leave the whole angel-demon problem out of it, and just assume that God's the only one that can will miracles into being. Very well. Okay. How do I know that it's a miracle? If I see something unusual and something bizarre, and I cannot personally explain it, it could have been a natural phenomenon. And I simply do not understand what that natural phenomenon is. For example, St. Elmo's fire is a natural phenomenon that people used to believe was a supernatural phenomenon until we learned and understood more about St. Elmo's fire. Similarly, thunder and lightning would be other events that people used to attribute to deities, but which now we do not need deities for. Even the rainbow is something that the Bible attributes to being created by God as a symbol of his promise that he will never again flood the entire world, but yet we understand rainbows wholly apart from God, and in fact, there is no way to show that rainbows did not exist prior to this event, given what we know about rainbows. But the miracle clause would allow one to say, well, the way that rainbows come into being with the light refracting off of water and etc. did not work until God willed it into being. That breaks science as we understand it, and it defies logic as we understand it. It is beyond our comprehension, and thus is not something that is logical. It is not something that can be comprehended. It is literally a defiance of what we call logic, reason, the scientific method, and how we know anything at all. If the miracle clause is in effect, then your answers to this person are not going to be logical. Everything you say from this point is baseless for logic, because you have invoked something that by its very nature defies logic, defies understanding. If I went outside and I saw a tree branch move on its own, and there's no wind, there's no animals, there's no strings attached to that tree branch, I could conclude that a ghost or God moved that branch, because these are entities that I might believe that exist and can affect branches. I don't know why that branch happened to move at that time, but nonetheless, God did it, and I have a miracle clause and a miracle explanation. Now, I might be wrong. The actual reason that branch moved is something that is wholly different from God doing it. But because I did not investigate what truly did move the branch, I only used what information I had about it to make a conclusion. I'll never know if that conclusion is right or wrong. The miracle clause halts my examination of what really did cause the branch to move. Now, I'm basing my knowledge on a few things. Okay, I know that there's no animals. I didn't see any at any rate. I know there's no wind. I didn't feel any at any rate. I know there's no strings. I don't see any strings that would move that branch. So, okay, I don't know what did it. So God did it. Well, that stops my investigation. I could have performed a better examination and might find out what actually caused that tree branch to move. But here's the deep question about this miracle clause. At what point, when I exhaust all potential naturalistic explanations, should I invoke the supernatural, the miracle clause? I, as a skeptic, would say never, because the supernaturalistic, the miracle clause, cannot be an explanation for anything. It itself is something that I have not been able to examine. In fact, it is something that cannot be examined by its very nature if it does exist at all. Therefore, I can never use it as an explanatory point to what I have examined. Merely because I have examined this branch moving and to the best of my abilities and exhausted everything that I can think of, that doesn't mean that it's magic that made it move. It just means I don't know why it moved, or how it moved, or what caused it to move. All I know is that it did move. That's it. I have a mystery. But I can't answer a mystery by another mystery. And ultimately, the mystery of miracle is something that we either think is possible, or we think we don't know even what it is, and how would we even identify a miracle if we saw one? My point here is not to tangent off into the problems of identifying miracles, which is a huge problem, and it is one reason to object to miracles happening at all. But my point here is to say that miracles are not logical. They defy logic. If the branch moving really is a miracle, that is the fact of the matter, I could never know that from my examinations of it. Exhausting all naturalistic explanations does not allow me to say a miracle, unless I knew that miracles were a real thing somehow. How would I know that? I guess I would have to know that there was a God, and I would have to know that that God could perform miracles and did in fact perform that specific miracle. Those things would also have to be something that I would have knowledge of in some fashion, in some manner. And without the data and evidence and arguments for that, I would never be able to come to the conclusion within the logical system. I would have to abandon logic in order to say that a miracle caused it, unless I had all of that data, which I do not have at this moment. So, you're saying that God miracled, essentially, Noah into being able to do this, leaves logic far, far behind. And thus, we definitely have to be skeptical of your opinions on this subject, because it abandons logic. It gives up on logic at this point, and we are outside the realm of logic. I'm still going to apply logic to everything you're saying. I'm going to talk and address things that you address here, but I want my listeners to understand where we are, and I want you to understand where we are. We are not in the realm of logic. We are in the realm of miracles, where anything is possible. So, if anything is possible, then God magicked this into working, or God miracled it into working. Okay. That's it. That's the explanation. That's not logical, but that's the explanation you want to give. Okay, if you want that to become logical, then you have to prove God, and you have to prove that God does miracles, and you have to prove that God did this specific miracle. If you can't do that with a logical argumentation, evidence, or some sort of proofs about that, then you have no presentation at all.
Now, building the ark took years. It's not like he had this done in one day and then the flood came.
But it doesn't really matter, because miracle. Noah could have made it in one day. God could have made the ark for him. It doesn't really matter at this point. Miracles allow for anything to be possible. So it doesn't matter how long or short it took him to make it.
And that long ago, we didn't have nearly as many species of animal and insect that we do today.
But it really doesn't matter how many animals and insects there were. And also, you're forgetting the fish would have also died out, because if salt and fresh water mix, that would kill off a large percentage of most fish. And you're also forgetting the parasites and things like that. But none of that matters because we have a miracle clause. The boat could have been a raft, and the story still would have worked because miracle clause. Noah could have suddenly gained the ability to walk on water along with the animals and his family. Why not miracle clause? Noah could have decided to put all the animals and his family into his mouth as he walked along the bottom of the sea, and God allowed him to do that. Miracle clause. The story literally doesn't matter. The how it works doesn't matter because miracle clause allows anything to work. It doesn't have to make sense anymore. The story can be as ludicrous as the story wants to be because we have miracle clause. Setting all of that problem or explanation aside, because as I said, miracle clause isn't really an explanation, but to me it's a problem, to you it's an explanation, but we can agree to disagree, fine. Let's set all that aside. I have a question. In fact, I have numbers of questions for you, and I would love for you to address these questions. How long ago was this, and how do you know how long ago it was? Give me those answers, because I don't think that there's any way for you to know how long ago it was, and I don't think that you have actual numbers. I think that you just think it was a long time ago. So that's nice. How long ago was it? Because that's something that could be examined. That's something that we could look at, and we could see how many animals and insects there were. But again, that number, whatever that number is, only matters if we're appealing to naturalistic explanations. The number is irrelevant if we have miracle clause in effect. It doesn't matter how many things there were. It doesn't matter how hard it would have been to take care of them. It doesn't matter that it is impossible by naturalistic standards. We have miracle clause. So it only matters if we're trying to make sense out of it in a naturalistic way, which you're not trying to do. So it really doesn't matter. I'm interested in if you know how long ago it was and how you would know how long ago it was. I'm interested in that idea. I'm interested in that information because knowing that will help me to know a little bit more about how you think about things and how you discover what things are true and what your methodology is to discover those things. And I'm very interested in finding out that information. But as far as trying to explain, well, there was fewer animals, you didn't need to do that for your friend here or your associate on Twitter, whichever they might be. All you had to say was miracle clause. In fact, that would have taken up the less characters than this video. You could have just said miracle, and that would have been the answer.
I've always personally felt science is a belief system.
No! So, as I was trying to say, no, your feelings are irrelevant. What matters is the truth. Science is not a belief system, it's a system, but not a belief system. And even if it was a belief system, that doesn't necessarily invalidate it. You have a belief system, that doesn't necessarily invalidate it. Simply because something is a belief system doesn't mean it's automatically false. But you're wrong, science is not a belief system, and I would encourage you to read up information about it and not make this argument of ignorance.
The belief in the findings of man that lean enough in one direction to satisfy curiosity for someone who doesn't believe in miracles or things they can't see.
This is God. You are wrong. Even God thinks you're wrong. Now, you might say, well, that wasn't really God. That was just you with a deeper voice. And I'll say, you can't prove that because you can't use science. You just have to believe that it really was God. What do you mean you don't want to believe that it was God? Oh, the Bible says it wasn't? Really? You want to go to the Bible? I bet that I could get scripture that could support a position that God might speak and might allow me to record it for a video. I bet I could. Do you want to take that bet? I'll debate you on it if you want. I'll win the debate. And I'll win the bet. How much do you want to bet? Do you want to bet physical money or do you want to just bet reputation? Go ahead. Try me. Try me. If we discard science, then anything goes. Literally anything goes. There are scientists that are Christians. So what you said is repugnantly wrong. Why not be like those scientists? They believe that by understanding the world through science, they will understand God better. Why not take that as your philosophy rather than what you're doing now, which is just repugnant, wrong, and ignorant to the extreme? You know that you're creating a stumbling block for me and people like me, right? You're creating a block that says either accept science or accept God. Well, if that's the case, I'll accept science and I'll continue to reject God forever and for all time. So don't be a stumbling block to me. Cut it out. I would say to you that you're a stumbling block for me and people like me. By telling us basically that we have to either accept God or accept science, you've created a huge stumbling block. The Bible tells you not to do that. So by you not doing it, you've made your religion be useless on top of everything else that I already think your religion is. So not only do I think that it's a mythology, that it's not true, but now I think it's useless on top of all of those things because you aren't even following it. So stop being a stumbling block. Learn what science really is, and then with that understanding, make a video response to this video. Okay? But don't do that until you actually understand what science is. Normally, I would count up the number of logical fallacies that somebody has, and in this case, we abandoned logic long ago. So literally, there's an infinite amount of logical fallacies because there is no logic. So all there is illogic, which means there's an infinite amount of it. Unless and until we have logic, we must completely and utterly reject these claims.